Boom! The bomb nobody sees coming is ticking at Hallas Hall. First, a secret war for the WR3 that could destroy or elevate Caleb Williams' future. A rookie with explosive potential or a veteran who eats concrete in every block. Second, the $1 million investment that pushed the coordinator to the limit. Was it a wasted RB or a mistake we'll all pay for? And third, the venomous rumor putting the local star in check. Betrayal or master strategy? This isn't theory. It's a raw analysis of what's coming in July. If you don't act now, you'll be left behind. Subscribe, hit the bell, and slam that like. Or live with the regret of not knowing how this ended. Spoiler, a key player just got the message that will change everything. Let's start with a fight nobody is talking about, but I think will be crucial for Caleb Williams' success. Luther Burden against Olamide Zaccheaus for the third receiver spot. And you know what's craziest about all this? Ben Johnson has a luxury problem on his hands. First, let's talk about Luther Burden. This kid was our second round pick 39, and let me tell you the full story because it's fascinating. Burden entered the 2024 college season as a legit first round candidate. Scouts had him projected between picks 15 to 25. But what happened? Missouri had absolutely horrible quarterback play. Burden finished with only 61 receptions for 676 yards and 8 touchdowns. Those are good numbers, but not spectacular for a first-round prospect. But here's what many don't understand. At Michigan, during his 3 college years, Burden averaged 15.7 yards per reception. 15.7! That's WR1 production, not WR3. And you know what excites me more? Burden still hasn't signed his rookie contract. Second-round picks are always the last to sign because guaranteed money is tricky to negotiate. But Bill Zimmerman from Windy City Gridiron reported that only 2 second-round picks have signed so far in the entire NFL. Burden is not alone in this. Now let's talk about Olamide Zaccheaus. And here's where the story gets interesting. This guy's the definition of grinder. He came to Atlanta as a 2019 undrafted free agent. You know what that means? 32 teams saw him and said, no thanks. But the guy didn't give up. His first year in Atlanta, 6 receptions for 84 yards. His second year, 16 receptions for 149 yards. But in his third year, boom! 31 receptions, 406 yards, and he played almost 60% of Atlanta's offensive plays. You see what happens when you give a warrior a chance. But here's what makes me completely excited. Last year in Washington, Zaccheaus finished second among Washington receivers in receiving yards. Second. On a team where Terry McLaurin is the established WR1, Zaccheaus managed to surpass all other receivers. 45 receptions, 548 yards, and 3 touchdowns on a team that made the playoffs. But you know what's most impressive about Zaccheaus? His versatility. In Philadelphia and Washington, this guy played in the slot, outside, ran routes from the backfield, and even worked in trips formations. Ben Johnson loves that kind of versatility because it allows for constant mismatches. And let's talk about blocking, because this is crucial in Johnson's system. Zaccheaus isn't just a receiver who blocks when needed. This guy enjoys physical contact. In Washington, coaches used him specifically on bubble screens because they knew he was going to gain yards after the reception. He averaged 4.2 yards after the catch. Did you see what Johnson did in Detroit with receivers like Zaccheaus? Amon-Ra St. Brown became a machine because Johnson knew how to maximize his slot ability and his willingness to block. Zaccheaus has that same profile, but don't sleep on Burden. His ceiling is much higher. At Missouri, despite a horrible quarterback play, Burden showed explosiveness that Zaccheaus will never have. His 40-yard dash time at the combine was 4.41 seconds. That's legit open field speed. And you know what else? Burden played with Drake May in his first year at Missouri, and his numbers were spectacular. 38 receptions, 539 yards, and 5 touchdowns in just 12 games. That's what happens when you have a quarterback who can make the right reads. The truth is that Ben Johnson has an incredible problem. Bill Zimmerman said it perfectly. Whoever ends up being the WR4 will possibly be the best WR4 in the entire league. Do you realize what that means for Caleb Williams? DJ Moore and Romo Duns are established WR1 and WR2. But now Williams will have a third receiver who would easily be the WR2 on any other team. That's a huge competitive advantage. And here's my prediction. Johnson will use both receivers in specific packages. Zacchaeus will be the third in 11 personnel formations when we need blocking and reliability. Burden will be the third in 10 personnel formations when we need explosiveness and speed. Do you think having that depth will be the difference between winning and losing the NFC North? If that surprises you, wait till you hear this. ESPN just dropped a bomb that exposes the reality about DeAndre Swift. And let me tell you, this is more serious than you might think. Accelerates. They released a ranking of the top 10 running backs for 2025. And guess what? 4 of those 10 players changed teams last year. Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, and Joe Mixon. But Swift isn't on that list. But do you understand the magnitude of this? It's not just that Swift isn't in the top 10. It's that all those running backs who switch teams are performing better than our guy, and we paid more than most of them. Let's go to the numbers because this hurts. But you need to hear it. Swift signed a 3-year, $24 million contract with $15.3 million guaranteed. Saquon Barkley signed with Philadelphia for 3 years and $37.75 million. And his first year was incredible. 2,005 yards from scrimmage and 15 touchdowns. 15 touchdowns! Derrick Henry signed with Baltimore for 2 years and $16 million. And at 30 years old, he had 1,921 yards from scrimmage and 16 touchdowns. 16 touchdowns! Josh Jacobs signed with Green Bay for 4 years and $48 million. And he had 1,329 yards from scrimmage and 15 touchdowns in his first year with the Packers. And Swift? 1,181 yards from scrimmage and 6 touchdowns. 6. Literally half the touchdowns of the other running backs who switched teams. But here's what really bothers me. I told you this when we signed Swift. Remember? I said Swift was talented, but there were red flags. In Philadelphia, Swift never managed to maintain the consistency we needed. He had brilliant moments, but he also had games where he completely disappeared. And you know what's most frustrating? Swift was literally one of the first signings when the legal tampering period opened. Ryan Poles was obsessed with this guy. The Bears had a plan from day one. Get Swift no matter the cost. But do you remember what other running backs were available in free agency? Tony Pollard signed with Tennessee for 3 years and $21.75 million with 1,347 yards from scrimmage. More than Swift. Aaron Jones signed with Minnesota for 1 year and $7 million with 1,138 yards from scrimmage in 15 games. Almost the same yards as Swift for a fraction of the price. But here's what hurts me most. Jahmyr Gibbs, who played with Johnson in Detroit, finished 3rd in ESPN's ranking. 3rd! And David Montgomery, his teammate in Detroit, also received votes to be in the top 10. Do you realize what this means? Johnson managed to have 2 Detroit running backs considered elite in the same season. Gibbs had 1,816 yards from scrimmage and 20 touchdowns. 20 touchdowns. Montgomery had 1,476 yards from scrimmage and 15 touchdowns. Between the 2 Detroit running backs, they accumulated 35 touchdowns. Swift had 6. 6! Gibbs and Montgomery combined for nearly 6 times more touchdowns than our star running back. But you know what's craziest about all this? Swift did receive some votes in ESPN's ranking. That means NFL scouts and coaches recognize his talent. The problem isn't ability, the problem is utilization and consistency. And here's where the pressure falls on Ben Johnson. His best statistical season was in 2022 with Johnson as the offensive coordinator. Swift had 1,269 yards from scrimmage and 8 touchdowns, but here's the key detail. He did it with only 229 touches. That's 5.5 yards per touch. In 2024 with the Bears, Swift had 1,181 yards from scrimmage with 271 touches. Only 4.4 yards per touch. See the difference? Johnson knew exactly when and how to use Swift to maximize his effectiveness. But do you think Johnson can recreate that magic here in Chicago? because there are factors that have changed. In Detroit, Johnson had an established offensive line with Frank Ragnow, Penei Sewell, and Taylor Decker. Here in Chicago, though we've improved the offensive line, we're still integrating new pieces. In Detroit, Johnson also had the threat of Jared Goff as an established passer. Caleb Williams is incredibly talented, but he's still in his second year, and defenses will study him much more than last year. And you know what worries me most? Swift will turn 26 in January. For an NFL running back, that age is crucial. If Johnson can't salvage this investment in 2025, Swift might start to decline rapidly. But here's what gives me hope. Johnson not only maximized Swift in Detroit, he maximized the entire backfield. Gibbs and Montgomery weren't just productive. Individually, they were productive together. Johnson found a way to use both backs so they complemented each other perfectly. Do you think Johnson will bring another running back to complement Swift? Because in Detroit, the competition made both backs better. Swift needs that competition to reach his maximum potential. My prediction is that Johnson will use Swift similarly to how he used Gibbs. In space, against mismatches with linebackers, and in situations where his speed can be a decisive factor. But Swift will need to fully buy into the system because Johnson won't tolerate inconsistency. Do you think Swift has one more year to prove he can be an elite running back, or is it too late to justify that investment? But that's nothing compared to what's coming. And here comes the news that will calm many fans, but also surprise others. Kevin Fishbain from The Athletic just debunked all the rumors about a potential Cole Kmet trade. And let me tell you, this story is much deeper than you might think. Did you see all those potential trades lists that have been circulating since we drafted Colston Loveland? Pure speculation. Fishbain was direct and clear. I'm not sure why the Bears would do that at this moment, but let me explain why these rumors started and why Fishbain is right to dismantle them. From the moment the Bears called Colston, Loveland's name with the 10th draft pick, analysts and fans assumed Kmet was on his way out. But they're completely wrong. First, let's talk about Kmet's numbers, because some fans have selective memory. In 2024, Kmet had 47 receptions for 474 yards and 4 touchdowns. Those numbers are horrible, but here's the context many ignore. Our entire offense was an absolute disaster. Do you remember who our quarterback was for most of the season? Caleb Williams is a rookie with little protection and coordinators who didn't know how to maximize talent. Our entire offense was dysfunctional. But do you remember 2023? Kmet had 73 receptions for 719 yards and 6 touchdowns. 73 receptions. For a tight end, that's elite production. Only 8 tight ends in the NFL had more receptions than Kmet in 2023. And in 2022, Kmet had 50 receptions for 544 yards and 7 touchdowns. 7 touchdowns. He was our second most reliable red zone option after David Montgomery. See the pattern? When Kmet has a functional offensive system, he produces at an elite level. When the system is a mess, his numbers drop. It's basic logic. But here's what excites me. Ben Johnson isn't looking to replace Kmet. He's looking to complement him. Did you see what Johnson did in Detroit with his tight ends? Sam Laporta finished with 86 receptions for 889 yards and 10 touchdowns in 2023. Those are WR1 numbers. But you know what's even more interesting? Johnson also used multiple tight ends in specific packages. In Detroit, they frequently had 2 tight ends on the field simultaneously, and both were legitimate receiving threats. Now imagine this. Kmet as the inline blocker and red zone threat, Loveland as the mismatch weapon from the slot. It's a nightmare for any defensive coordinator. How do you cover 2 tight ends who can both block and receive? And you know what else? With Keenan Allen off the team, someone has to fill that red zone void. Allen had 7 touchdowns last year. Our team leader. Who's going to replace that production? DJ Moore and Rome Odunze are threats, but Kmet has the experience and size to be dominant in the red zone. Fishbain makes a brilliant point about the difference between speculation and reality. He says it's common to speculate about a player who could be a trade candidate. That usually means nothing. Exactly, just because analysts think something might happen doesn't mean it will. And you know what's craziest? Some fans are asking to trade Kmet for draft picks. They're crazy. Kmet is 25 in his prime and knows the system perfectly. Why would you exchange that for an uncertain pick? But here's the analysis no one is doing. Johnson has already publicly said that Kmet will have a key role in the offense. Do you think Johnson would say that publicly if he's planning to trade him? Impossible. And you know what that tells me? Johnson sees something in Kmet that the previous system couldn't maximize. In Detroit, Johnson turned Laporta from an average Iowa tight end into an immediate Pro Bowler. What can he do with Kmet, who already has experience and a connection with Caleb Williams? But let's talk about formations, because this is where it gets interesting. Johnson loves 12 personnel formations, 1 in RB, 2 TE, 2 WR. In Detroit, they use 12 personnel on 28% of their plays compared to the NFL average. Of 18%, that's a huge difference. Can you imagine 12 personnel with Kmet and Loveland? Kmet is 6'6" and 260 pounds. Loveland is 6'5" and 245 pounds. Both can block as an extra offensive line or go out on routes. How do you defend that? And you know what's most exciting? Johnson also uses 21 personnel formations, 2 RB, 1 TE, 2 WR, with the tight end as the focal point. In Detroit, they use those formations to create mismatches constantly. Laporta averaged over 10 yards per reception because Johnson knew exactly when and where to use him. Kmet has the same physical traits as Laporta, but with more experience. Do you think Johnson will waste that by trading him for draft picks? And let's talk about the competition in the NFC North. The Packers have Luke Musgrave, but he only had 34 receptions last year. The Vikings lost TJ Hawkinson to injury, and his replacement Josh Oliver had only 22 receptions. The Lions have Laporta, but we have 2 tight ends who can produce. My prediction is that Johnson will revolutionize how we use the tight end position. Kmet will be our possession receiver and red zone threat. Loveland will be our mismatch weapon and YAC specialist. Both will have 50+ receptions. Tom, you think trading Kmet now would be the biggest mistake we could make? Or do you still think we should look for draft picks? Here's my final analysis, Bears fans. After analyzing these 3 situations deeply, I believe we are seeing the foundations of something truly special here in Chicago. The battle between Burden and Zacchaeus isn't just about who will be the WR3. It's about creating the most impressive receiver depth the Bears have had in decades. Do you remember the days when a WR3 was a question mark every season? Those days are over. The situation with Swift is complicated, but Johnson has proven he can maximize running backs that other coordinators couldn't use correctly. If Johnson can recreate the magic he had with Swift in Detroit, Swift could easily be a top 10 running back in 2025. And the decision to keep Kmet alongside Loveland is what excites me most. Johnson will create formations that NFC North defenses have never seen. 2 tight ends who can both block and receive is a massive competitive advantage. But you know what's most important about all this? Johnson has more talent to work with than any offensive coordinator has had in Chicago since when? The days of Matt Forte and Brandon Marshall? Possibly since then. Williams will have DJ Moore and Rome Odunze as his primary options, but he'll also have Burden Zacchaeus as WR3, Swift as a dual threat back, and Kmet and Loveland as mismatch weapons. That's an offensive arsenal that can compete with any NFL team. And you know what gives me more confidence? Johnson has proven he can integrate all these pieces. In Detroit, he didn't just maximize individual players, he maximized the entire system. St. Brown, Laporta, Gibbs, Montgomery, Williams, Reynolds all had their best seasons under Johnson. The pressure is now on Johnson to prove he can recreate that magic here in Chicago. But with the talent we have, I believe we are seeing the beginning of the best offensive era in Bears modern history. Are you as excited as I am? Do you think Johnson will be able to integrate all these pieces perfectly? Or do you still have doubts about some of these decisions? Leave your answers in the comments because I want to know exactly what you think about each situation. Burden or Zacchaeus? Will Swift rebound or was it a mistake? Will Kmet and Loveland be the best tight end duo in the NFC North? This Bears community is a family, and these discussions are what keep us united during the offseason. If you're as excited as I am about what's coming, like this video and subscribe to the channel because I guarantee you tomorrow will have more explosive news about our Bears. And remember, training camp is only days away. The rookies report on July 19th, and we'll finally see all these battles in action. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single update. They Bears, and until next time, Chi-Town.